Please welcome to the stage General Manager, EMEA, North Amazon Web Services, Marielle Lindgren.
Hello, everyone. Oh, what a poor response. Hello, everyone. And a very warm welcome to the AWS Summit here in Amsterdam. It's amazing to see you all here. And I really appreciate that you've taken a whole day out of your busy schedule to be here with us. My name is Marielle Lindgren, and I lead AWS across Northern Europe, including Nordics, Baltics, and Benelux. I'm really excited to be here today and to meet all of you. The summit is an opportunity for us to come together, to share knowledge, to get inspired, and also to push the boundaries of what is possible. I think you will love what we have prepared for you today, and I hope you will leave this day feeling energized, inspired, and with a lot of new skills to take away. We are over 5,000 of us here today in this room, and we have more than 50 sessions prepared for you, covering a broad range of topics, from business transformation right through to technical deep dives, where you can hear from our customers how they are driving transformation on the AWS cloud. In addition to the sessions, we have some really cool things going on in our expo. We have the partner talks, where you can hear about services and solutions to accelerate in the cloud. We have the startup loft, and we have the innovation corner, where customers will showcase their innovations. I am a huge F1 fan, and I hope, given that I am in the Netherlands, that we have many other F1 fans, Max Verstappen fans, so please don't miss the F1 Game Day, where you can hear about AWS for sports and machine learning. If you want to see everything that is going on during the day, download the event app, and you can build your own schedule. I'd like to say a huge thank you to all of our sponsors that have helped make this day possible. Our global sponsors, who are critical to all of our summits, not just here in Amsterdam, but across the world. Also, a special thank you to our Emerald and Platinum sponsors, Accenture, Deloitte, Snowflake, Trend Micro, and Orca Security. And a big thank you to our Gold, Silver, and Bronze sponsors who have made huge investments, both in terms of time, people, and money to make today happen. Please join me in thanking them by giving them a big round of applause. A little bit later on, I will welcome up on stage our VP and distinguished engineer, Andy Warfield. But before that, I would like to share a bit about how AWS is helping create a thriving digital economy here in the Benelux, helping Benelux customers grow, innovate, and compete at a global scale. We are in the midst of a massive movement towards cloud. According to Eurostat, in 2021, 41% of European companies had adopted the cloud. That means 59% of companies had not migrated yet. In the Netherlands, we are ahead of the rest of Europe, with 48% cloud adoption. Not too long ago, we conducted research with Public First, and we found that further digitizing Europe can unlock 1.5 trillion euro of economic value. Can you imagine? That is increasing the size of the European economy with over 12%. That is huge. We also found that further digitizing the Netherlands, reaching 75% cloud adoption, could increase the economy by 179 billion euro. That is equivalent to 20% of the Netherlands economy. And this is why we are so passionate about helping companies adopt the cloud. Industries have a lot to gain from digitization. An excellent example of this is Heineken, who are using machine learning on AWS to improve their meshing process, automating parameter adjustments such as time and temperature. And after some 500,000 hectoliters brewed using machine learning, we found that extract losses reduced with over 11%. As Heineken is bringing more breweries onto their digital platform, further optimizing the process, they could save up to $14 million. Another excellent example is NN Investment Partners, who reduced over 50% of cost by migrating their self-managed SQL servers to Amazon RDS. And by that, reduced the time it takes to spin up a new cluster from 1 week to 1 hour. Add to that automated backups, infrastructure patching, and the engineering teams could spend significantly less time on database management and more time on innovation. These are some excellent results, and we are really proud to work with all these digital frontrunners. As you can see, there is a deep culture of innovation here in the Benelux. And a little bit later on in this keynote, you will hear from two of our customers, the Efteling and Just Eat Takeaway, on how they are innovating on the AWS cloud. In order to enable this innovation, we continue to invest in the Benelux. As I travel around in Northern Europe meeting customer executives, there is always one challenge that everyone brings up: access to cloud skills. We are investing hundreds of millions of dollars across over 200 countries, providing free cloud computing training. And Amazon has pledged to train 29 million people by 2025. Since 2017, we have trained over 50,000 people just here in the Netherlands. And I'm particularly proud of a program called AWS Restart, where we are helping unemployed, underrepresented talent build cloud skills. Another significant investment area is, of course, security. Earning and maintaining trust is really the very essence of our business. And therefore, it makes me very happy to share that the AWS Global Cloud Security Program has signed an agreement with the Dutch National Cybersecurity Center to help the Netherlands on how to handle and deal with cybersecurity threat by sharing best practice and guidelines. I'm also very proud to announce that we just signed a frame agreement with the central Dutch government, enabling ministries and departments to use AWS Cloud to innovate, to transform, and become even more sustainable. If you want to find out more about these programs and initiatives, please come see our public sector team at their booth later on today. Sustainability is by far the single biggest challenge of our generation. Amazon has a commitment to be net zero carbon by 2040. That is 10 years ahead of the Paris Agreement. And we are on a path to powering our operation with renewable energy, 100% renewable energy that is, by 2025. In fact, already today, 95% of the energy we use is renewable. And already today, Amazon is the single largest corporate purchaser of renewable energy. We keep investing in this, and earlier this year, Amazon announced we will be funding I would say it's the world's first commercial-scale seaweed farm is called North Sea Farm 1, and it's located off the coast of the Netherlands. The purpose of this is to test and improve seaweed farming, but also to research the possibility of seaweed to capture and store carbon. We also announced late last year that we will be water positive by 2030. That means that we will be bringing back more water to communities than we take out and use in our operation. And in fact, already today, the Sweden region is using outside air to cool the data centers 95% of the year, significantly reducing the need for water and electricity. We also announced just a few months ago, actually, that we will be switching to hydro-treated vegetable oil to power our backup generators. Our regions in Europe are the first ones to make the switch. And for those of you that don't know what HVO is, it is a renewable, biodegradable, non-toxic fuel. If you replace diesel with HVO, you can reduce emissions by about 90%. These are some of the reasons why research shows that AWS infrastructure is about 5 times more energy efficient than the average European data center. But it's not only about that. We also help companies build their own sustainability solutions. And if you want to find out more about that and discuss with us how we can help, please come see our sustainability team at the AWS Hub later on today. Looking ahead, we will continue to help Benelux customers grow, innovate, and compete at a global scale. We are very excited about the huge opportunity that exists ahead of us. I want to again thank you all for being here with us today. We built this day for you, and I really hope that you will enjoy it. With that, I say we move forward and we talk about a slightly different topic. Let's talk about how companies are using the power of AWS to transform industries. And here with us today to talk about that, directly from Vancouver, it gives me great pleasure to introduce and welcome up on stage our VP and distinguished engineer, Andy Warfield. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. Thanks for having me. I'd like to start by just observing that this is the first in-person summit that we have had in Amsterdam since 2019. And already this morning and at the rehearsal last night, I'm finding it absolutely incredible to have conversations with 3D humans. I've been sitting in my basement, originally in my son's bedroom with bunk beds behind me on video conference for several years, and it's just really nice to have conversations with real people. So I hope you're all having a great time on that front. This is my first time speaking in Amsterdam. And so I thought I'd just start by introducing myself. I thought I'd maybe tell you a bit of a professional thing and a bit of a personal thing about me. Professionally, I'm from Vancouver. I've done a couple of startups. I was a university professor, and I've been working at Amazon for 6 years now. And I'm maybe a little bit unusual as a speaker in this track because I'm an engineer at Amazon. I've been an engineer for my entire career. And I'm lucky to work across mostly our storage services. I spend a lot of time with S3, EBS, EFS, and so on, building and operating the service and launching new features. And it's really, really rewarding. Personally, I'd like to tell you that coming from Vancouver to Amsterdam this week, I love licorice, like a lot. And it is delightful to see how seriously the Dutch culture takes licorice. It's like a thing that I've realized this week that Canada is a little bit culturally deprived for. And so I read this article. Somebody pointed me at this site called Things Dutch People Love, Things Dutch People Like. And it has facts about the Dutch eating licorice, including the fact that the average Dutch person eats something like 4 pounds of licorice a year. And I'm pretty sure that I'm approaching 4 pounds of licorice since Monday of this week. So thank you for your licorice. Anyways, that's enough about me. Let's talk about AWS. The technology decisions that you and your organization are making right now, today, will have resounding impact for you for years that follow. And so it's really important that you work with a cloud provider that innovates on your behalf, that is constantly, obsessively working with providing new features and performance and cost improvements to the services that you run. In the last year, AWS has launched over 3,300 new services and features. The pace of innovation across our teams is absolutely breathtaking to be a part of. It's just really, really amazing to see so many people so engaged in delivering so much cool technology. And it's all centered around our customers. The next year, which we're already partway through, is shaping up to have the same pace as the year that just passed. I'd like to take a moment and tell you about 3 of those features. The first one is the launch over the past couple of months of Inferentia 2 instances. These are purpose-built instances for deep learning and inference. They provide the highest performance and lowest cost inference in the cloud. A second feature that we've launched is one that I've been very personally involved in terms of like kicking off and building the team that developed. A lot of the work actually for this happens on teams in Cambridge and Berlin. And that feature is Mount Point for S3. We've built a connector for S3 that's a client-side library that gives you file APIs to S3 to connect throughput-demanding clients in to work with S3. So it's used a lot by deep learning, data lakes, and in some cases, genomics workloads that want to do really, really high-scale throughput into objects in S3. And the last one is that we've had a couple of very, very exciting machine learning announcements. The first one I'll mention is Code Whisper, which is IDE support that monitors and reacts to the developer as they write code and suggests not just completions of individual terms, but writes whole functions based on comments that you write. If you haven't tried it, you should absolutely try it, and I'll tell you more about it a little bit later today. The other one is Amazon Bedrock, which is a preview service for foundation models, LLM, and generative AI. Speaking of generative AI, this has been one topic that there's already been a huge amount of conversation on, even today. There was a breakout on it earlier. Generative AI is I don't know, it's like nothing that I've seen in my career. I've seen lots and lots of exciting new technologies arrive and move forward, but generative AI and large language models have really seemed to capture the imagination of everyone. I'm sure you've had conversations with folks outside of technology on generative AI. So I'm not sure I can think of a shift that's been so captivating for people, and I think we can all agree that it's going to be very transformative for almost every industry. A really cool thing about these technologies is their ability to comprehend and work with really subtle nuance in speech and language, to generate realistic images and video, and as I said with Code Whisper, even help write code. A lot of customers that I get to talk with on a day-to-day basis are already doing things with generative AI. And our mission with it, the way that we're thinking about generative AI in AWS, is we're treating it like we do any other technology category, which is to say that we are working very hard to remove any barriers to you being able to benefit from it. We're providing deep subject matter expertise, complex infrastructure management, and removing prohibitive cost structures so you can just get going and focus on getting value. So before I go into a lot of the rest of the talk, I'd like to take a few moments to talk about innovation. We commonly think of great ideas as coming from a single spark of insight, like a eureka moment, an aha, where everything just suddenly comes together and amazing things happen. And history kind of supports that notion. For example, the ancient mathematician Archimedes uncovering the principles of buoyancy while he was sitting in his bathtub. Or, flashing forward about 1,800 years, Newton discovering gravity, ostensibly after watching an apple fall from a tree. Or flashing forward even further, and this one's my favorite, the inventor Rabinov inventing magnetic storage media. I'd like to tell you about this one a little bit because I learned about this as I was preparing this talk, and it's really neat. So Rabinov was an American inventor. He worked at the government agency that preceded the National Institutes of Standards in the US. And he was asked to build a magnetic storage device. And the idea that they took to him was that they would use ferromagnetic material, and they would etch on top of or encode on top of flat sheets of metal, kind of like pieces of paper. And they'd have a machine that could pull them out, and then the head would move in 2 dimensions on top of it to read the data off of it. And Rabinov looked at it, and he'd had loads and loads of experience working both with mechanical devices and with magnetics. And he thought that that idea was kind of terrible, right? It was too complicated to move all of these individual pieces. And so he borrowed the idea from record players, phonographs, of encoding on a disk. And then he did a really, really amazing thing. He built this contraption that had a series of disks, not unlike a hard drive today that has a bunch of platters stacked up, except that in his version of things, he couldn't move the armature through the disks. He moved the head sideways across them, and so he cut a pie-shaped hole out of all the disks. And so the disks would rest with this open sort of cavity across the row, and he could move the heads between them and spin them. And Rabinov described this as being able to read a book without opening its cover. This is really neat. So, as engineers and technology leaders, it's really natural for us and for our organizations to look for opportunities to create moments like those, the light bulb moments. But thinking about it, I feel like that moment, as much as we glorify it historically, is actually the least interesting part of the entire process of innovation. I think the things that happen before and after that moment are way more interesting. Before that moment, with all 3 of these inventors and with all of us working in our jobs, there's so much time invested in collecting data and integrating it and synthesizing new ideas. And the amount of things that had to happen leading up to those moments for those insights to happen are the really important and necessary parts of innovation. But after those moments happen, the great bit is all of the stuff that happens as a result of those moments and watching the sort of cascade of new things that come. And you realize that those light bulb moments are really just steps along a path of other light bulb moments. And so if we go to these 3 examples, a structured understanding of buoyancy established the groundwork for cargo ships, international trade and diplomacy, and technological marvels like the port of Rotterdam, which is the largest port in Europe and the 2nd largest port in the world. But still going with buoyancy, this is a really, really fascinating thing that I was reading about just recently, which is the Dutch experiment to do a floating power generation using solar panels that follow the sun. And so this is potentially a really sustainable source of electrical generation that doesn't even use land in order to power the generator. It floats in a lake. On the topic of power generation, there it is, gravity still is proving to be really, really interesting as a source of generating power. And there are a whole bunch of startups as well as other reasonably large-scale projects right now looking at doing things like, using tides or ballast to float a weight and then using the weight effectively as a battery to generate electricity after the fact. And so you see things like, the wind turbine here, which is a really, really great sustainable source of power, except it depends on the wind. And so being able to transfer that power into something that's gravity-powered allows you to balance the load and not only provide at certain times. Going back to Rabinov, hard drives obviously have had a long-term material impact. S3 today, I'm sure is not surprising, although I still find it surprising every time I get to talk about it. S3 uses literally millions of hard drives worldwide to store your data. But something that's really, really fascinating about the structure of S3 and the hard drives that it runs on is the multi-tenancy of the system means that we can take individual customers' data and spread them over huge numbers of drives, which means that when you need performance out of S3, which often happens in bursts, you can draw on way more drives than you could recruit if you were building your own local storage system. And in fact, there are actually tens of thousands of customers in S3 today who individually have data spread over 1 million drives or more each, which is just amazing to think about. So these inventors were all experimentalists and builders, just like you. They worked from data and interpretation. Their light bulb moments were built on years of experimenting and learning and building insight from the data that they used. And they catalyzed a lot more than just one idea in one moment. They began spinning a flywheel of improvements that continue to this day. Data can help us better understand our customers. It can improve the quality of our products and shorten development lead time. Data and the ability to work with it really effectively is at the very center of modern invention. Just like with hard disks and power generation, innovation requires connecting the dots across data and turning it into insights and actions. Our experience, both in building our own systems at AWS and helping millions of customers build theirs, is that becoming effective and agile with a data strategy will help you become effective and agile as organizations. So for the next bit of my talk, I'd like to discuss that idea of building a strong data strategy. Now, we work with millions of customers, and those customers are at all different points of their cloud journeys. Some are just adopting the cloud, just taking their first steps into moving applications or building new applications in the cloud. Some are very mature. Some started their business in the cloud and have grown over 10 years to have really, really mature practices. And when we look at the AWS customers that are the most agile, the most fast decision-making, and the most effective at using data, a few things stand out in terms of how they use our services and how they build their own applications. The first one is that they aren't wedded to individual applications and analysis tools. They realize that one-size-fits-all solutions are pretty rare. And so they're free with their teams to adopt the right tool for the right job and to move quickly into new tools, not being biased by the ones that they already use. A second property is that when they work with data, they benefit from integration of data access to their applications. They spend more time working with data in apps and less time trying to plumb it and wrangle it together. And finally, and this one I'll talk about in more detail in a few minutes, but it's a really, really interesting observation that we've seen over the past few years. Data governance is something that historically, I think we all viewed as being a point of friction. But the thing that we notice with our most agile customers is that governance is actually an accelerator. So I'd like to start by talking about the comprehensive set of tools. At AWS, we know data. After all, Amazon S3 was one of the very first AWS services. It launched about 17 years ago. It was the first scalable object store in the cloud. And now S3 holds more than 280 trillion objects. That's a lot of objects. If each one of those objects was a sheet of paper, and we made a big stack of all the objects, stacking up the S3 objects, what the team spends lots of time doing, it would be 28 million kilometers tall, halfway to Mars. That's just a crazy amount of objects. Of course, S3 was only the beginning for AWS's forays into storing and managing data. With continued innovations like data analytics and AI, ranging from things like SageMaker to DynamoDB. Since introducing these products, we've continued to launch new features and services that make it easier for customers to create, store, and act on data. S3 has become really remarkable. When we started with it, the idea was largely around it being an archive, a file system for the internet, but generally, customers treated S3 as sort of a storage locker across town that you would load your trunk up with, drive across, put stuff into, and leave it there. It was a very sort of secondary or tertiary type of store. This isn't the case today. S3's APIs have become so ubiquitous and supported by all sorts of different applications in terms of integrations that S3 has become this basis for data lakes. And a really, really common pattern that I'll talk about today that we see in loads of customers is they move their data into structured or semi-structured formats in S3 and then benefit from the wide range of integrations that S3 has into other services to get value from their data. By putting it in S3, they're not wedded to an individual point of integration. And so we'll see customers, even customers with on-premises enterprise storage, set up mirroring into S3 for their data, potentially take advantage of Athena to do some initial querying against that data, but then build dashboards with QuickSight or start to do machine learning with SageMaker. S3 becomes a jumping off point for all sorts of value. We also offer the most complete set of purpose-built databases, and we're continuously adding new features. In 2009, we started with Amazon RDS, which provided a scalable and easy-to-manage relational database. Now, as I sort of hinted at before, our customers prefer highly optimized databases, not jack of all trades and expert of none. And so we now offer 8 purpose-built databases that all focus on a specific individual use case. This same approach of breadth and depth is true in how we approach analytics. We pioneered cloud analytics with the launch of Elastic MapReduce in 2009. EMR now supports several open source frameworks like Apache Spark and Apache Flink. We did the same thing with Redshift for data warehousing and Kinesis for data streaming and processing for our customers. Each of these new services helps you derive meaning from your data by connecting those dots. VOO is a really awesome example of this approach. VOO is a Belgium-based telecommunications firm that offers services such as internet connectivity, cable, and telephony for both residential and commercial accounts. They have over 950,000 customers. And VOO uses exactly the pattern that I just described with S3. Their data lives in S3, but it moves to Redshift to get unified customer insights by querying petabytes of structured and semi-structured data in their S3 data lake. And the results that come out of Redshift benefit from Redshift's data lake export feature to save results back to S3, where VOO can then take that data and do machine learning on it in SageMaker. And speaking of SageMaker, let's talk for a few minutes about our ML stack. AWS machine learning capabilities offer breadth and depth, as I was saying, to builders of all levels of expertise and sophistication in machine learning. They range from ML infrastructure for the expert ML practitioner to fully trained AI services that are easily integrated into your business processes. At each layer, we remove the undifferentiated heavy lifting so that you can move faster. We innovate from silicon to software to APIs. Our TRN1 instances, based on our custom AWS Trainium chips, offer the most cost-effective ML training in the cloud. Optimized versions of the most popular deep learning frameworks, including PyTorch, TensorFlow, models from Hugging Face, offer the best performance for the cloud. Meanwhile, services like Amazon SageMaker make it easy for developers to create new ML models. And at the top layer of the stack, we have AI services with built-in machine learning, like Amazon Transcribe and Textract, so that you can add AI capabilities to your business applications even if you don't have any depth in ML or experience there at all. Machine learning is undergoing an enormous transformation, and models are getting larger and larger. This race in terms of the power of large models and the growth in the size of models is jaw-dropping and something to see as a technologist. Just 3 years ago, we thought models were getting pretty big, certainly big relative to anything that we'd seen at the time. At the time, 3 years ago, models had millions of parameters. The latest LLMs and foundation models that we're seeing developed today have hundreds of billions, approaching trillions of parameters. That's a huge number of orders of magnitude over only 3 years of development. As we discussed earlier, there's so much excitement and interest around generative AI because of its potential to be so transformative. And so it's worth asking yourself and really thinking about what's stopping you from using these technologies in your business if you aren't already. To make it easy to build and scale generative AI applications on top of foundation models, we recently announced Amazon Bedrock and our Amazon Titan models. Amazon Bedrock makes foundation models accessible via an API. These are foundation models from AI21 Labs, Anthropic, and Scalability.ai. I've really enjoyed, and I find it just really cool, the way that the teams at AWS are approaching building on top of foundation models. And it's been really interesting to see how it's differed from some of the other ways that these LLMs and foundation models have become available to developers. One thing that really stands out is rather than the idea of bringing your data to a third-party modeling infrastructure where you aren't as confident about how the data is being used, we've taken the approach of bringing the modeling infrastructure and all of the learning tools to our customers and to their data. So our belief is that you should have complete control and autonomy over the data that you are training on top of. You should understand not just where that data lives, but how fine-tuning and parameter changes in the model are kept. That should be your remit. And so as you see Bedrock and things evolve, I think the one property that you'll see is a huge focus on the privacy and the sort of stewardship of the information that you're working with for training. LLMs already power services like AWS Code Whisperer, an ML-powered code generation service for developers. And as I was saying before, Code Whisperer is just really fun to play with. And one thing that's especially neat about it, I've been using it in my IDE over the past 3 months about, and it's improved even over the 3 months. So it's really neat to see how quickly this stuff is moving. Code Whisperer automatically determines the cloud services and code libraries best suited for a task, and it recommends code snippets real-time directly in the IDE. You can use it with VS Code, with IntelliJ, Cloud9, and more. Unlike traditional autocomplete style tools, Code Whisperer is really kind of in a different world from traditional autocomplete. It's able to suggest entire functions as you code. It's really weird. So you start typing a comment, I'm writing a function to do whatever, and then Code Whisperer suggests the function. It's really, really fun to play with. And best of all, right now it's free for the individual tier, so there's nothing stopping you from kicking the tires on it. Now, despite the amazing results from pre-training models, there are massive benefits to human-based training, reinforcement, and review to make a model perform well for you, for your specific use cases. When we think about LLMs, we think about 3 key requirements. They must be helpful, they must be accurate, and they must be harmless. And so as you look at fine-tuning and adjusting the behavior out of your models, it's frequently the case that you want to have human-in-the-loop sort of tagging and labeling on the data. And so a few days ago, we launched a human-in-the-loop labeling feature for SageMaker Ground Truth Plus. So this is kind of neat. There's an AWS customer called Crikey AI. And Crikey AI takes a text description of a video, and it generates 3D avatars performing whatever action. So if I was a much better dancer, I would have like a thing of suggesting that I do the floss or dance a 2-step or something. None of you want to see me do any of those things, and I'll probably fall off the stage. So instead, I use the text string, person riding a bike, right? And this is the kind of feedback that Crikey gives you. Now, it doesn't do the model of the bike. That's something that you would add later, but it generates the avatar. It's really fun to play with. You can go online and try it out. Now, the thing that's neat with the human-in-the-loop labeling for this is I actually submitted a video of myself riding the bike. So last weekend, I was out with my kids. I went to the University Endowment Lands, which is a big park in Vancouver near the university, and I went bike riding. And so one of my kids took a little 5-second video of me on my bike, and we submitted it to Crikey to help develop their model. And so this is the view that the human-in-the-loop, behind the scenes, supporting Crikey's model would see. And so the human provides the labels that inform the evolution of the model. It's really kind of neat to see how this fits together. If you'd like to know more about generative AI use cases, don't miss the breakout session, Building Generative AI Applications with AWS by Creative Fabrica. It's at the Startup Loft at 12:15. So you can enjoy a sandwich with cheese at the expo and then learn about building generative AI applications on AWS. Anyways, let's get back to those 3 pillars of a strong data strategy. The second one is this idea of integrating data and spending time working with it instead of trying to get it into your applications. We've been working on this for years. It's been an enormous focus inside our service teams. For example, you can stream data to Amazon Redshift for analysis as soon as it's produced. We've integrated SageMaker within our data warehouses and databases so that you can use your data for machine learning without having to build one-off data pipelines for it. But innovation does not mean stopping halfway. The vision that we are working toward across all of our service teams in AWS is something that we're calling a zero ETL future. Zero extract, transform, and load. This is a term from traditional databases and data warehousing that talks about pulling the data out of one source, putting it into the right format for the next source, and then loading it into that source. We'd like to completely eliminate this from working with data in all of our services so that you can easily and quickly connect and act on all of your data wherever it lives. But just connecting to our data and analytics services is obviously not enough. AWS also connects to hundreds of external data sources. That includes SaaS applications, on-premises infrastructure, and other clouds. For example, with SageMaker Data Wrangler, our low-code data preparation tool for machine learning, you can easily import data from machine learning model training from more than 40 connectors, like Databricks and Snowflake. We also recently announced the general availability of Data Exchange for Amazon S3, which makes it easy to find, subscribe to, and use third-party data directly from the provider's S3 bucket. And so just like I was suggesting that you go play with Code Whisperer, you should go play and look at the catalog for Data Exchange because it is also really, really fun. So if you go to Data Exchange on the web, you'll find just a huge list of data sources. And the data sources are just all over the place. There's everything from like historical weather data to used car prices to like menus of restaurants to close of day stock prices over huge periods of time. There's any source of data that you could possibly be interested. There's research data of protein sequencing or genomic sequencing as part of COVID research. There's just so much stuff in here. And a lot of it is actually free to access. The only cost is the S3 request charges to access the data in another bucket. So this is a really accelerating tool for building lots of applications. It's literally a marketplace for data. Now, the last pillar of the data strategy that I'd like to talk about is governance. How we support your organization in building the mechanisms to foster innovation while providing governance from end to end. Now, I think a good way to talk about this is if we start with a quick car analogy. Why do cars have brakes? So they can slow down quickly, right? But why do cars need to slow down quickly? They need to slow down quickly to help them go even faster. Better brakes on a race car can do even more to win a race than a larger engine, which is heavier and needs more gas. It's because they add safety, and by adding safety, brakes increase confidence. They give the driver the confidence to really move fast, knowing that she can do it safely. Governance should be like this. Historically, when organizations use the term data governance, they often meant it in a really restrictive way, locking down data into silos, imposing coarse-grained controls on who can work with it, that made working with that data really slow, and in some places, just prohibitively expensive. It's kind of like driving with your foot on the brake all of the time. And so by freeing up governance, and by looking at it more as something that's just a pervasive aspect to how we build, we can really free up teams to move faster. And so while governance is absolutely a guardrail, it's not comfortable to hit a guardrail. It's way better if we have mechanisms that keep us in the lane as we work with our data. Here are 3 examples of built-in governance tools that customers are using to move faster. The first one is lake formation. Lake formation has added the ability to add sub-object permissions and governance on data in S3. That means that if you're storing Parquet objects or tabular data in S3, you can set governance properties at a row or cell level, sub-object, which is a really, really powerful way of allowing different teams to share data, but restrict who's allowed to work with what. For machine learning, we recently announced new features in SageMaker to address common machine learning governance challenges, from onboarding new staff to centralizing and documenting model information. But for true end-to-end governance that manages data access across all of your services, which is the future state that we are building for you, we recently announced the preview of Amazon Data Zone. Data Zone is a data management service that helps you manage data across all of your services along the entire data lifecycle of discovery, access, and usage. It gives you complete visibility and control over how the data is being shared, who is sharing it, who authorized that sharing. Data Zone is now in preview for customers to try. All of these innovations come together to allow your organization to become truly data-driven, where you shift from just collecting data to focus on actions, outcomes, and insights, where you have a comprehensive and integrated suite of services, and where there's constructive governance in place to let everyone move fast with confidence. But that's enough from me for now. Let's hear from one of our customers on how AWS services like SageMaker and Aurora helped an iconic Dutch destination improve their customer experience and deliver a lot of fun and entertainment. Please welcome, from what's probably your favorite amusement park, the Efteling, Jonas Rietbergen, Manager of Data and Insights.
Good morning.
Hi, Jonas.
Good morning, thank you.
There you go.
Thank you. Hi. Good morning, full crowd. Great to be here. Thank you, Andy. I'm Jonas. I'm head of the Data and Insights team at the Efteling. And I was just curious, by showing of hands, who doesn't know the Efteling? Only 2 hands? It cannot be true, right? For everyone who doesn't know the Efteling is the #1 theme park in the Netherlands. It's, as you can see in this little movie, it's a very fairy tale-like and natural environment where you have roller coasters, attractions, with 5.4 million visitors each year. We're also in the top 5 of Europe, and our leading start towards 2030 is to become a theme park resort, a European theme park resort, where each and every guest will have a 9+ guest experience. But if you ask your Dutch neighbor on what the Efteling is all about, then that really hasn't changed from 1952 when we were founded. Because the Efteling is really all about creating memorable moments with the ones that you love. And I happened to live very close to the Efteling when I was a kid. For me as a kid, it felt like forever, but it turned out to be only a 45-minute drive. But every year we would go to the Efteling. And it was a big thing for me because I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters. And every year that we would go, I was so excited because my big question was, am I tall enough to ride the Python? I see some people nodding. So I was measuring the night before. And why was it so special for me? Because I knew that if I was 120 centimeters, I was allowed only with my dad to ride the Python, which is, for people who don't know the Efteling, it's a roller coaster. It's not a code. So actually, as you can see, that's me in the Python. Don't worry, you can't see me. The guy with the beard, it's my dad. So I guess I was tall enough to ride, but not tall enough for the photo. So back in, I think it was 1989, back in 1952, creating memories, that's really what the Efteling is all about, and spending quality time with your loved ones. But we also have this leading star of being a 9+ guest experience for each and every guest. And in order to achieve that, we have built Vision 2030, where we believe that we need to do 5 things very right. The first 2 are actually the core, of course, of the Efteling, which is creating immersive experiences and making sure that of our 3,000 employees, each and everyone can make a difference to you as a guest. Technology and data, which I will talk about. And of course, we cannot do this alone. We need partnerships, and we believe we should do it in a sustainable way. But there's one big problem in reaching the 9+ experience if you talk about theme parks, right? What is the number 1 problem of theme parks? Waiting times, exactly, waiting times is the number 1 problem of our theme park, and it's hindering guests to have a 9+ experience. And we know that we cannot solve waiting times completely. And we also know that you actually need some waiting time to build up anxiety to write a Python, for example. But we also saw happening in the park that guests tend to create their own peaks in the park. So everybody goes running in the morning, goes running for the roller coaster. So we thought, okay, that's interesting actually. And we also saw that in the morning, nobody was going to Carnival Festival. And we asked ourselves, why is that? So everybody knows Carnival Festival, right? And if you don't know the ride, you probably know the tune, huh? Ta 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 ta. Right? Yeah, you can finish it. It's interactive session. No, just kidding, just kidding. So that brought us to an idea, actually. My clicker is not working anymore, or it's still working. We had this big idea. We saw those peaks, and we thought, okay, if we can convince 270 people to not join the Baron waiting line at the peak of the waiting time, we can shave off 20 minutes of that peak waiting time. So we are a data and insights team, so we only had our gut feeling, so we needed data and insights. So we developed a very, very crappy, research app. People got a free coffee for it. That allowed us to track people throughout the park. So we saw actually, okay, our gut feeling was right. We do see that people, that guests tend to create their own peaks. Then we thought, okay, smart as we are, we need something to convince guests to make a different decision, right? So what do you need? You need a recommendation engine, right? So we built a recommendation engine. It's a neural network model. Very cool, and it would take your current waiting times, expected waiting times, your size of the group, your group composition, and it would, simsalabim, it would give you an advice. It was brilliant, a brilliant, brilliant recommendation engine. And then only 10% accepted our brilliant advice. So we were scratching our heads, and we thought, okay, what's happening? And we dove into the feedback, and we saw, okay, as soon as we give people insight on why we actually give this recommendation, so if we give them insight in the expected waiting times of attractions, people tend to accept that recommendation much, much more faster. And then we thought, okay, let's put the recommendation engine aside for a moment, because we know that 80% of our guests uses the Efteling app. What if we put the expected waiting times into the Efteling app? So where did we start? Of course, we started by building a data lake. We've got a lot of beautiful lakes in the Efteling, but we didn't have a data lake yet, so we asked our partner Inkido to build a data lake. They said, you can do it in 3 weeks. We didn't believe them. After 3 weeks, we had a data lake, so it went surprisingly well. And for this data lake, in that data lake, all the features that the model needs to run a recommendation or to run a prediction for the waiting time is in that data lake. Then the model itself, so that is predicting the waiting times every 30 minutes, is on AWS SageMaker. All those predictions, they are fed to Aurora, and then they are sent over to the apps and to the app of the Efteling. And over 1.6 million active users every year, so we needed it to be really reliable. Everything is managed by Apache Airflow, by the way. So this is how it works. And then we were, of course, very afraid that all of a sudden everybody would run to Carnival Festival in the morning. That didn't really happen because we did an A/B test. But that also helped us give more insight on, okay, what does this actually deliver? And we were quite astonished by the results. First of all, of course, the team of the data scientists did a great job because the mean average error of the model is only 4.5 minutes across all attractions. More importantly, 2/3 of our guests feel they get more out of their day. And most importantly, I would say, we were able to have an additional 0.19 on our overall guest satisfaction. So if you're talking about our leading star, getting to the 9+, maybe 0.19 feels like a little, but we're on an average now of around 8.5. And if you're then able to move that needle from an 8.5 with a 0.19, it was quite a lot, actually. And it might sound strange, because now I've thrown all numbers at you, but it might sound strange maybe as a data and insights guy. Like, this is only data, right? So the 9+ is only data. And we're here in the Amsterdam Rai, and you don't have a real feeling with this data, right? We should have more feeling towards what this 9+ actually means. So that's why I have a very short movie on what we believe is a 9+ guest satisfaction.
Yay! Efteling! Yoo-hoo! Efteling! Yay!
In the fairy tale. It's wicked, isn't it?
The dolphin! Yeah!
That was so good and magical, so good, we're gonna go and do it again.
So hopefully you have a feeling towards that 9+ now. If anything, I would like you to remember 3 things. 1, start with your biggest problem. Don't be afraid. 2, partner up like we did with Inkido. And of course, 3rd, next time when you visit the Efteling, visit Carnival Festival first.
I really like the slide with the 1s and 0s in the lake in the middle of the theme park. Maybe there's an opportunity for a new data lake ride at the Efteling. Or maybe I should keep my ideas to cloud infrastructure instead of that. Thanks, Jonas. I thought I had a cool job, but getting to take people's experiences at a formative childhood event and make them better sounds like a pretty awesome job. That's amazing. Now, invention is more than just having an idea. You also have to build it. And so now we get to talk about building our ideas on top of AWS. When we look back across the last almost 2 decades of cloud computing, I think what we see is ahead of the cloud, the internet democratized access to information. And it laid the foundation for faster innovation. But the cloud really democratized the act of creating. The cloud made it possible for anyone, literally anyone, to learn, use any tools, build any application at any scale. And it's just been remarkable to see the acceleration across only 20 years of cloud computing to where we are today. And this has always been our focus at AWS. We build on your behalf at the infrastructure and services level so that you can focus on innovation, bringing your ideas more quickly and in more cost-effective ways above those tools and services. And the data shows that it actually works. A study found that migrating on-premises workloads to AWS, companies reduced the time to market for new applications by 43%. For example, HEMA. And HEMA is new to me, but I visited yesterday the store, and the store is amazing. I was able to find a replacement tire for a bike, sausages, and insurance under the same roof. It's like a uniquely Dutch thing. It's really fun. HEMA migrated 15 ERP components and 150 services from large applications to microservices. First, by migrating to AWS, they realized better agility through fast rollout of new services at scale. Second, they achieved better quality of service through access to a broad selection of microservices. And third, their development teams gained faster time to market for retail innovation applications, such as content personalization for their customers. And through all of this, they lowered their infrastructure costs by 30%. Just like one size does not fit all for data and analytics tasks, workloads are also incredibly diverse. And that's why, over the past 17 years, we focused on supporting every type of application in the cloud. Whether you're running enterprise and high-performance computing, modern cloud applications that were written first in the cloud, latency-demanding applications, or IoT, Internet of Things applications. Some applications even need to run on premises, and we love those too, just as much. We provide tools to manage those seamlessly in hybrid cloud environments. And so when we talk about building, I'd like to describe 3 aspects of how we build at AWS. We offer the most capabilities of any cloud provider. We offer fantastic performance and cost optimization. And we work relentlessly to provide a consistent development experience across all of the places where we offer builders services. AWS now has over 200 fully featured services, more than any other cloud provider, ranging from compute, storage, networking, machine learning, and even quantum technologies. And we have the deepest functionality within each one of those services. Let's take EC2, for example. EC2 now has over 600 instance type options for you to choose from so that you can choose the most appropriate compute for the applications that you're building. But EC2's offerings, these 600 types, are virtual machines. It's only one of the types of compute that we offer. You can choose, if you want to work with containers, from either Elastic Container Service or Elastic Kubernetes Service, ECS or EKS for container-based orchestration. You can go completely serverless by using Lambda or Fargate. And within Lambda or Fargate, we've launched a huge suite of services that are serverless and allow you to build on top of them. Things like AWS Step Functions, EventBridge, DynamoDB, and SQS and SNS. Since its launch, we've added over 105 new features to Lambda. And one example here is a new feature called Lambda SnapStart. SnapStart's really, really neat. It achieves 10 times faster function startup performance for Java functions with minimal or no code changes in most cases. And the engineering team that did this work, I've talked to a lot, and they're really, really fun folks. They actually have a research paper written on SnapStart at Usenix ATC this year. So if you're really interested in getting into the details, you can read a whole bunch of the gory parts of how SnapStart works and creates really fast Java function launches. One customer that's enjoying the magic of serverless and benefiting from SnapStart is PostNL. PostNL has a 220-year history and is now a front runner in the usage of serverless and event-driven architectures, especially at enterprise scale. PostNL delivers an average of 1.1 million parcels a day. And a really interesting thing about the way that PostNL builds over AWS is they don't just have a cloud-first mandate, they have a serverless-first mandate. And so all new development is done first in serverless tools. And so when SnapStart launches, and suddenly application functions start 10 times faster, they just benefit from it. Imagine that. You wake up one day in the morning, and you have a 10x performance advantage on part of your service. It's like one of the most fascinating things about building over the cloud. Let's shift and talk about performance for a few minutes. The great thing about the cloud is that, like that 10x benefit for SnapStart, we're constantly innovating to deliver exceptional performance at the best cost. Historically, better performance required higher costs, but today, our economy of scale and hardware innovations provide you with better performance at lower costs. To start talking about this, we can talk about Nitro. And this is a really personal topic for me. Hypervisors are a key element of managing virtual machines. 20 years ago, I lived in the UK for 4 years as a grad student at Cambridge. And the research team that I worked with when I was doing my PhD built an open source hypervisor called Zen. So the hypervisor is this low layer of software that takes the physical machine and makes it appear to be a bunch of virtual machines. And at the time when we were building Zen, the CPUs that we were working with weren't intended to be virtualized. And so we had to do all sorts of crazy tricks and learn a lot. We spent long nights reading CPU manuals. If you're looking for like a great sleep aid on a weeknight, that's basically it, the CPU instruction manual. And so we built Zen, and Zen actually was the basis for EC2 initially, right? A lot of the original cloud providers built on top of the open source hypervisor that we developed. But as they scaled it up, what they found, and this was an absolute reality of building a hypervisor on top of commodity processors, was that there were a bunch of functions that the hypervisor had to perform that were just really, really resource expensive, and also a pretty scary surface from a security perspective. Right? So I/O virtualization was one of those things. Whenever you sent requests to the disk or the network, we had to plumb them out of the virtual machine into a different virtual machine, do all of the virtualization, and then send it down. And so what AWS did was to build a hardware assist for virtualization, the Nitro system architecture that offloads a whole bunch of that risky and performance-demanding I/O virtualization work down onto a platform that provides greater security. Nitro security is built in at the chip level to continually monitor and protect hardware against potential threats. It also supports really cool new features like Nitro enclaves, which provide a high-trust environment that you can use to put the most sensitive code in a safe execution environment. Nitro also delivers significant performance advantages because of those overheads that I mentioned in the hypervisor. So your applications can become more efficient. On the current 6th generation x86 EC2 instances, Nitro can deliver 15% higher throughput on some workloads compared to other major cloud providers running the exact same hardware. But our innovation doesn't stop at Nitro. We actually moved further down the stack. We designed our own processors, starting with Graviton, which is now in its 3rd generation, delivers the best end-to-end performance and energy efficiency. And the energy efficiency here is really, really interesting. Graviton 3-based instances are 25% faster than Graviton 2, but they use up to 60% less energy than comparably performing EC2 instances. And so for the same performance, you're using less than half the power. And this change is so profound that even internally, service teams like S3, where I spend a bunch of time, are actively moving to adopt Graviton 3 for huge portions of our fleet, certainly for all new compute, specifically because we're trying to drive energy savings. Customers of every size have migrated to Graviton, and they're achieving up to 40% better price performance. For example, there's this small startup that I'm not sure if any of you have heard of, Epic Games. They began developing their services on AWS in 2012. They went all in on AWS in 2018 to deliver the storage, the analytics, and the scaling demands of games like Fortnite. Does anyone play Fortnite? Does anyone have children that play Fortnite? A few? Using tens of thousands of Amazon EC2 instances powered by AWS Graviton processors, Epic scales compute capacity at optimal performance to support millions of players globally. We're always innovating to improve performance on your behalf. Let's look at another recent example at the network level. Scalable, reliable datagrams, or SRD. SRD is another really, really technically fascinating example of how we can innovate in a cloud environment. Historically, when we talk about networking on the internet, we use TCP. TCP is the de facto network protocol for everything, and you'd be crazy to question TCP. Except TCP is a protocol has been around for as long as the internet. It's kind of the defining protocol of the original ARPA internet. But it's an incredibly general purpose protocol. TCP is designed to survive all sorts of networking environments, including high delays between sender and receiver, loss, and all sorts of other functions. As a result, TCP works well generally, but not always well in specific environments. And so with TCP, you see high tail latency and slow achievement of throughput in a lot of cases. And so looking at that and looking at customer demands for ever improving latency, especially in the tail, we decided to revisit the construction of transport protocols for the cloud and came up with SRD. SRD is a protocol that's actually co-designed with the fact that we build our own data center networks. So with SRD, we're factoring in the fact that we understand the buffer lengths in our switches and nitro at the endpoint, and all of the points in between the applications that are talking to each other over the network. And so SRD achieves incredible improvements in both performance and reliability across the network. And on the performance side, it's not just latency, but also throughput between endpoints. Now, the protocol is great, but obviously we can't change every single customer application to use SRD. Those things have TCP cooked into their kernels. Fortunately, we can bring SRD to your applications underneath ENA. And so with ENA Express, we're able to plumb the SRD performance benefits into mainstream applications by delivering it over Nitro under your instances. And so with ENA Express, you can immediately benefit from the performance of SRD without modifying your applications. That's something you just can't do in an on-premise data center. Nitro, AWS Graviton, SRD, and ENA Express are all examples of how we relentlessly work to increase performance while lowering costs. And last but certainly not least, we've been working hard so that you have AWS infrastructure and services wherever you need to build your ideas. The AWS global infrastructure delivers a cloud infrastructure that you can depend on, spanning 99 availability zones within 31 geographic regions around the world and over 410 points of presence. No other cloud provider offers as many regions with as many availability zones. And it's worth taking a moment to talk about availability zones, because I think this is a construct inside AWS that isn't celebrated and discussed nearly as much as it should be. A lot of cloud providers use the term availability zone, but they don't have the same meaning as what it has always meant inside AWS. When we build a region, availability zones were created as a primitive to allow you to build distributed systems that have really, really strong fault domains between their components. And so when we enter and build a region, we build at least 3 availability zones, and we build them with a trade-off between the resilience of a building and the survey that we do on where to put that building, and the speed of light for network in between the individual buildings, right? So the idea is that you have within a region very low latency across points, but you can provision resources in an availability zone and have high assurances that 2 availability zones will not experience failure at the same time. The amount of work that goes into that isolation is really, really incredible. Availability zones have their own distinct power. They have their own distinct structure, but they also involve surveys to ensure that they're isolated against things like flood risk or wildfires, depending on the individual location where we're building. And so this is something that you can really take for granted because it's just there, but it's a unique thing to AWS, the strength of isolation in these. We give you the flexibility to run applications closer to where you need them, within the same network control plane, APIs, and AWS services that you have in regions. AWS local zones and AWS wavelength give you single-digit millisecond latency, like the local zone that we've recently announced here in Amsterdam, which is coming soon. Or you can run your applications on-premise with AWS Outposts. We can even extend into remote or rugged locations with limited or no connectivity to the cloud using the Snow family of devices. And underpinning all of this is world-class security. Our core infrastructure is built to satisfy the security requirements of global banks and other high-sensitivity organizations. This is backed by a deep set of cloud security tools with over 300 security, compliance, and governance services and features. So, if you want to turn your ideas into reality, there's no better place to do it than on AWS. But let's hear from another customer how AWS is helping them achieve their goals in the cloud. It's my pleasure to invite on stage another Dutch company many of you know very well, and perhaps some of you use on a daily basis. Please welcome Mert Öztekin, Chief Technology Officer at Just Eat Takeaway. Hi, Mert.
Thank you, Andy. I
Thanks
brought
for
you
coming.
pizza, if you don't mind. Pizza formaggio. I hope you like that,
Oh, thank you.
that cheese. And please leave 5-star rating, okay?
I'll
Thanks.
give you this.
Hey,
Go enjoy my pizza.
see you. Enjoy. Hello, everyone. I hope you are enjoying the conference so far. My name is Mert Öztekin. I'm the Chief Technology Officer of JustEatTakeaway.com. And today I will tell you a little bit about who we are, our story, how we evolved during time, and why I'm so engaged about our business. So first of all, for the ones who are not unfamiliar with our brand, JustEatTakeaway.com, we are a global leader in the online food delivery marketplace, acting as a bridge between consumers and partners. Well, maybe you never heard about JustEatTakeaway.com, but we operate in 20 countries right now, and potentially you have seen our orange backpacks outside in 20 countries. We have our local brands. In Germany, we have Lieferando. In UK, in Italy, in Spain, in Ireland, we have Just Eat. In Canada, we have Skip the Dishes. In the US, we have Grubhub. In Israel, we have Tembis. And if you are from the Netherlands, you must know Thijs Bezorgd. And sorry for my bad Dutch. I just moved to the Netherlands and trying to practice. So how big we are? Let me give you some numbers. Our technology organization is about 3,000 people spread to 7 countries right now. And last year, we connected almost 700,000 restaurants, grocery stores, and non-food stores to 90 million active customers. Just last year alone, we processed about 1 billion orders through our platform. So as you can see, these numbers are quite huge, but we didn't reach those numbers overnight. JustEatTakeaway.com was founded actually in the Netherlands, as Thijs Bezorgd, 23 years ago. And the idea was simple: bring convenience and joy to our customers. And I don't know about your experience, but I still remember my first food delivery, online food delivery experience, which was 20 years ago. I was a student, I was playing online games all the time, and one day I decided to place an order online instead of calling the restaurant. At that time, there wasn't smartphones available, so it was really old times. And I just loved it. Not the food itself, food was good, but I loved the experience, the convenience, the simplicity, just going back and ordering again, don't need to feel, don't need to call someone, don't need to ask questions. I just loved it. And 7 years after my first ordering experience, I thought about something. I have 2 passions in my life. One is food, the other one is technology. And maybe food delivery is the best place that I can basically combine my 2 passions. That's why I decided to join this industry. And when I was waiting in the interview room for the job, I was obviously nervous, but I was trying to cool myself down. And I was saying that, Matt, it's just a website. It cannot be too complicated. You will be fine. Just move on. And yes, the idea was simple, actually. Well, the customers come to our platform. It could be website, it could be app, it could be other ways to order. They see all the restaurants, grocery, non-food partners. They place their order. They can pay online, they can pay offline, and then the order is delivered. And I was quite fine with it. But after joining the business, it didn't take long for me to understand that actually what's happening behind the scenes is significantly more complicated. First of all, the volume is substantial. You have millions of customers coming to your platform every day. And as you can imagine, they are coming when they are hungry. which is lunchtime or dinner time, or if you have a halftime break and the Champions League final. And you have hundreds of thousands of partners connected to your system. They are receiving orders every second. They are sending you feedback about the orders. They can update their menus multiple times a day, and they can get the data from us to improve their business. And on the background, you have a massive operations, customer service, sales, marketing, to make sure that we are improving the experience every day, and also every ordering experience is as good as possible. Well, as you know, we have grown in time. We got bigger and bigger and bigger, but we realized the limitation. There were lots of cool restaurants outside, but they were not delivering because they didn't have their own couriers. That's why we decided to introduce our own logistics network. So I don't know if you know what logistics network is. Basically, the nice people delivering the food for you outside. Well, if you know a little bit about it, you would agree that there are two big challenges about logistics network. The first one is it's costly. So you have hundreds of thousands of couriers outside delivering food. And you cannot charge 10 euro for a pizza delivery to the customers. No one will pay it. And you cannot stack 10 pizzas of 10 different customers with the same courier. Then the experience will be terrible for the customer. That's why the best and only tool you have is using the technology to optimize the experience and also the cost. That's why we have lots of machine learning algorithms running and optimizing everything in real time. The second biggest challenge is, as I said, hundreds of thousands of couriers are sending signals to you every second. You know their location, where they are going, which restaurant they will land, when they should land, and then when they should take the order to the customer. And this is quite a technical challenge for us because we need to process millions of data every second to make sure that the experience is good for the restaurant, good for the customer, and good for the courier as well. And don't forget the fact that we are delivering pizzas or burgers. So if the courier is early to the restaurant, you have a problem because the courier will wait and waste his time, and your logistics network will basically slow down. But if the courier is late to the restaurant, that's another problem because the food will get cold and no one will be happy with their experience. So that's why the technology that we build has to optimize the cost and experience all the time. Well, in time, obviously, we got better and better with the technology, with the experience as well. And we ask ourselves the question, why don't we deliver tomatoes for the breakfast? Or what if the customers want a battery for their remote controller in the evening? That's why we started to introduce grocery and non-food delivery through our platform. Well, when you have a logistics network running well, you have the basics there, but you still have new challenges. The first challenge is, well, a typical Italian restaurant should have about 100 items in their menu. Pizza, margherita, formaggi, you name it. But if you are working with Walmart in Canada, they have thousands of items they can sell online. Or if you have your own express stores, which you provide the items, you need to handle all the complexities there. And more importantly, the second problem is, or the challenge is, well, you have limited size in this package. You cannot just fill 20 toilet papers into it, or you cannot carry 20 cans of beer with the same courier. So your technology first needs to understand what is being ordered, and if the information is not available, try to analyze it, optimize it, and if needed, provide multiple couriers or challenge the customer to make sure that the order will be good enough. Now I told you a little bit about technical challenges that we have faced during our evolution. And as you can imagine, when you have thousands of engineers deploying thousands of codes to tens of thousands of containers every day connected with event streams, when you have millions of customers coming to your platform every day, and when you need to be connected to the hundreds of thousands of partners and hundreds of thousands of couriers in real time, you need a really, really good infrastructure. Secure, safe, stable, and scalable. That's why we have partnered with AWS for years, and we have an amazing trusting relationship with them. Well, that was my time, and I hope I could tell a little bit about our history and what we are doing. And I love this experience, and I love working for Just Eat Takeaway, because our passion is food and our power is technology. Thank you.
Thanks, Bert.
Thanks, Andy. This is yours.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Do I have pizza? Is it? OK, I ordered lunch, but I'm sure you're all very hungry. So let me wrap this up really, really quickly. We're moments away from lunch. We saw that by moving to the cloud, you can unlock the value of all of your data with an end-to-end data strategy and build any type of application you can imagine on the most reliable cloud. But the best part is, this was just the warm-up. There's a whole day of sessions ahead. So you can see in depth how we are developing new services to solve problems, lower your costs, and drive growth, and how our customers use AWS technology to improve their business. Now, I'm going to try and use a Dutch word that I learned earlier this week. I think it's going to be a gezellig day today. I hope I got the pronunciation on that OK. I encourage you to spend the day exploring, having great conversations, and especially learning. Thank you all, and have a wonderful day here at the summit.